We're here to talk to you about navigating the public school system. In particular, this recording should be responsive to parents' questions or concerns in relation to children with disabilities. My name is Pamela Bishaya. I'm with Advocacy Denver.
And I'm Jane Miyahara. I'm with Denver Public Schools. We're so excited to welcome you to DPS, and we'd like to give you information on transitioning into DPS the best way possible.
And when we talk about transition, it could be that you have a 3-year-old that's coming into Denver Public Schools, or it could be that you have a preschool age child who's getting ready to transition to kindergarten. There are a number of different school systems. Certainly there are private schools. There's public schools. In Denver, there's a neighborhood school. But in Denver Public Schools, they also have schools of choice. Every family enrolling their child in a Denver Public School is required to fill out a school of choice application. And then during this presentation, we're going to talk about students with disabilities and the continuum of services or placement. The one thing I wanted to mention is private schools, while it's a school system, they do not have an obligation to provide special education and related services. And in fact, they really do not have an obligation under Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So as families are looking at choices, if they are looking at a private school, and if you do have a child with a disability, it's probably important that you ask the question in terms of whether that private school does offer any kinds of accommodations, modifications, or programming for children with disabilities. In the public school system, there are a number of different laws that they and rules that they need to follow. Certainly there's federal law, and then there's state law. There's Board of Education policy. And in Denver Public Schools, you know, there are traditional schools, there are innovative schools, there are charter schools, and all those schools essentially follow Board of Education policy. There are district procedures, and then each school, there is some autonomy where they can define their own school rules. The most important public laws for parents who have children with disabilities are the federal laws. There's Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, the Rehabilitation Act. Specifically, we look at Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. And then for all families, the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. That really talks about your child's educational record and your right to view your child's records, and when or if you have questions or concerns or believe that the records are inaccurate or misleading, there's some procedures where you can challenge those records. And then there's another long list of federal laws that speak to the education of children.
If a student qualifies for special education services, we as a district must provide FAPE, which is a free and appropriate public education. And so with FAPE, we try to place children in the most appropriate environment, the least restrictive environment, and we really try to encourage inclusion. Every once a year, or really at every IEP meeting, Individualized Education Program meeting, or Section 504 meeting, a parent will be provided a copy of the procedural safeguards. The procedural safeguards really speak to the student's rights under state and federal law, and then it defines the authority of the parent or of the district to protect the educational interests of the child. We've included some definitions because in public education, we use a lot of acronyms. Free appropriate public education, or FAPE, is the right of a child with a disability to receive the special education and related services outlined in their IEP. That free appropriate public education must be provided at public
expense without charge under public supervision and direction, and it's really available to children ages 3 through 21. I say through 21, it's ages 3 or until the child graduates with a general education diploma.
The least restrictive environment is very important because, to the maximum extent appropriate, we want children that qualify for special ed services to be educated with their typically developing peers.
Why is least restrictive environment so important? I love this picture. Supplementary aids and services. Supplementary aids and services means aids, services, and other supports that are provided in regular education classes, other education-related settings, such as field trips or special events in the school, and in extracurricular and non-academic settings to enable children with disabilities to be educated with non-disabled children to the maximum extent appropriate. Sometimes families ask, what are examples of supplementary aids and services? It certainly could be adaptive equipment, such as a special seat or a cutout cup for drinking. Assistive technology, there's a long list of assistive technology that may be appropriate or available to a student, such as a word processor, special software, or even a communication system such as an augmentative communication system. Supplementary aid and service could also include training for staff, for the student, and or parents. You know, sometimes parents, it's appropriate to provide parents training. For example, is if your student was learning American Sign Language, it would be appropriate to teach the parent American Sign Language, and that way people are able to communicate with each other across environments. And or if your child has a behavior intervention plan, there's probably value in terms of both the family and the school having the same training, so everybody's on the same page and it allows for continuity across environments. Another example of a supplementary aid and service could be health, personal care, or even an instructional paraprofessional. What is an individualized education program? An individualized education program is a written statement of the educational programming designed to meet your child's individual needs. The IEP defines programming to address the child's educational needs that result from his or her disability. The IEP, I really believe, is the cornerstone of a quality education for each child with a disability. This little slide, some of the words that come to mind as we're thinking about an individualized education program. It talks about the child's needs, certainly services. There's current or present level of performance. There's a piece of it where the school would monitor the child's progress. But as I said, the IEP includes a written statement of the child's performance. That's both academic achievement in reading, written language, and math, but functional performance in terms of skills and activities of daily living. Also, when you think about the present level of performance, it would probably talk about the child's social, emotional needs or how well they're doing in terms of the way they interact with peers, with adults across school environments. The IEP also includes measurable annual goals, special education and related services, and supplementary aids and services, and accommodations and modifications.
Goals are very important when we're looking at the IEP because these are what the staff will be working on to create growth and bring the child up to grade level. And so in the early childhood setting, goals may look a little different because child's learning is play, but regardless, goals should be understandable and smart. They should be specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound, academic, functional, and or behavioral. We look at them annually. It should be very clear how they're measured, and you should receive a progress report at least 3 times a year.
What are special education services? Special education services means specially designed instruction to meet the unique needs of your child. What are related services? Related services may be identified to help your child benefit from special education by providing extra help and support in needed areas. Related service providers include a speech-language pathologist, occupational therapist, physical therapist, social worker or psychologist, a nurse, or vision or hearing itinerants. What is the difference between an accommodation versus a modification? Accommodations are provisions made in how a student accesses and demonstrates learning. For example, books on tape, assignments being shortened to allow the student to demonstrate mastery. I always look at accommodations simply provide the student with a level playing field. Modifications are really substantial changes in what a student is expected to learn and demonstrate. Some students are eligible for what are referred to as extended evidence outcomes. And while the outcomes align with grade level standards, the learning and demonstration is very different. For example, all other children might be expected to read a passage and identify key details. And the extended evidence outcome might be that when a passage is read to the student will identify a picture of the main character or topic. The IEP is essentially a contract between the parent and the school district. As such, the district has a legal obligation to meet the terms of that contract. I included this cartoon just because AdvocacyDenver, we provide advocacy support to families, and we kind of thought we find this one funny. It does say, I'm not sure why Mr. Barth always feels compelled to bring an advocate to the IEP meeting. And sometimes when we walk into IEP meetings, especially where you have kids with that are more complicated, you sometimes have a physical therapist and an occupational therapist and a vision itinerant and a special ed teacher and a general ed teacher. And so sometimes it's nice to have a friend with you or an advocate, someone who can just simply be a second set of ears to listen to the discussion, and sometimes simply to help you remember what your questions were for the team.
I think that it's really important as a parent. We all want you to feel comfortable in the meeting, so definitely speak up if there's anything that's making you feel uncomfortable. It can be very overwhelming to have so many people around, but all of them are there for a reason. You are encouraged to ask questions and share your thoughts in these meetings.
And always feel comfortable. If you hear an acronym that you're not sure what that means, always feel comfortable asking questions. I'm a mom where I have a child who was identified as a child with a disability at birth. Now she's my woman child, but I remember the first individualized education program meeting. I was really reluctant or almost scared to ask questions. And yet it was a team that sometimes they would use acronyms, and I thought if I asked the question, it would appear as though I didn't have a good level of understanding or that I really wasn't very smart. And yet there came a point where I had to become very comfortable saying, could you please tell me what this means? And teams really appreciate
explaining information. And sometimes too, it just, when you ask them, what does a BIP mean, it reminds them not to use acronyms that everybody's not aware of. And then also too, sometimes after the meeting, you think of different questions, always feel comfortable writing those down and getting back to the case manager and asking those additional questions. How can I prepare for the IEP meeting? Make a list of your child's strengths and your current concerns for your child's learning. Provide the school with a copy of any kind of private evaluations completed within the last year or relevant medical information. I always think it's important, if you have a private evaluation, provide a copy of that to the school as soon as possible. And that it's very difficult for the team to consider the results of a private evaluation if you bring it to the IEP meeting. You know, certainly you recognize that they need time to read the evaluation and really consider the results of the evaluation as they're looking at developing the IEP and making that offer of a free, appropriate public education. And then one of the things that we always do is we always ask the school to provide a copy of the current assessments completed by the school and a draft copy of the IEP prior to the IEP meeting. Getting a draft copy of the IEP is, first of all, recognize it is absolutely a draft. There's still an opportunity to make changes, but it really provides you with a level playing field, that you have an opportunity to read through the information and to think about what recommendations the school might be making. Public law. Colorado, there's public schools of choice. And in Denver Public Schools, there are 2 times where families are asked to or can submit a choice application. Denver Public Schools is getting ready for round 1 of choice. That happens in late January. There's a time where families are provided an opportunity to submit a choice application for different schools. And then there's a lottery where they go through and they look at how many seats are available in the school. They pick names, and then families are given a decision in terms of whether their child's name was selected. Because your child has a disability, parents don't have an advantage in that the first priority is not to offer a seat to a student with a disability. Rather, in Denver Public Schools and other school systems, schools of choice, as I said, is a lottery. Round 2 really happens after families have been given written notice in terms of what school their child can attend. And then round 2 really goes for the rest of the year. Is once round 1 has closed, then during the summer, during the regular school year, families can fill out a choice application, a round 2 choice application. Public schools of choice, in terms of children with disabilities, a school district may deny to enroll a student in a school or program for any of the following reasons: lack of space or teaching staff within a particular program or school, and that when a school's at capacity, it's at capacity. The school requested does not offer appropriate programs or is not structured or equipped with the necessary facilities to meet the special needs of the pupil and does not offer a particular program requested. I want to give you an example here is probably one of the lower incidence disabilities is deaf or hard of hearing. And there are some children where at a very young age, their primary mode of communication, they may be looking at a mode of communication where it's American Sign Language. is not every single school is able to offer that particular programming. And so there may be one school where they have the sign language interpreters, where they have the staff that's skilled and is qualified to teach a student that different mode of communication. And so under public schools of choice, the law would suggest that you really don't have the right to say that I expect that a different school that doesn't offer that programming, that they must offer that program. And then there's the third thing under public schools of choice. The student does not meet the established eligibility criteria for participation in a particular program, including age requirements, course prerequisites, and required levels of performance. An example here might be that Denver Public Schools has a program called Polaris, and Polaris is a school that's designed for students that are highly gifted and talented. And so in that school, in their application process, they can look at the student and they can look at, do they meet that eligibility criteria as being not just simply gifted and talented, but highly gifted and talented. Picking a school. Always contact the school before you visit. You want to make sure students will be in the building. And then as you're looking at picking the school, consider the curriculum. Think about what you know about your child. When you look at the long list of schools in Denver, they have many, many different offerings. Is the school one where the curriculum is core knowledge? Or is it one where it's an expeditionary learning model? Or is it one dual language where your learner might be an English speaker, but in the dual language program, they might be learning, being provided instruction in Spanish or another language. Think about the school structure and culture, and think about the school day and calendar. Is Denver Public Schools, there are many schools that follow a different calendar. There is the traditional school calendar, but there are other schools where they start early, they end later, but then they take more frequent breaks during the school year. And then finally, accessibility is, you know what your child's needs are, and think about as you're touring the building, if your child uses a wheelchair for mobility, will they be able to participate in every activity? Is the playground accessible? And then think about other kinds of accessibility as well.
What I do when choosing a school is really tell parents, you know your child the best, and you know where your child will thrive. And so when you walk into a school, you'll be able to tell how your child will respond to that school. And so I always really stress, go with your gut feeling. How do you like, how were you received in the front office? And what do the classrooms look like? Are they inviting? Are all the kids happy and joyful? And that is so important in early childhood.
And then one other thing that I suggest to parents is certainly you get a sense of the culture of the school. But I always suggest that parents do not pick a school based on the personality of one teacher. One of the things that I've observed in Denver Public Schools is the teacher that you meet today, the teacher you fall in love with today, that teacher may make a decision to leave that school or retire. And so think about the entire school, thinking about from preschool through 5th grade, or in some of the schools, they work with students through 8th grade. And then there are some schools where they work with students preschool through graduation.
For transition, transition is so important. And so we hope that there is communication between the sending and receiving teachers and providers. You should have a copy of the IEP But you might also want to add supplemental information that include a picture of your child, which is so helpful, and bullets of the most important information, strengths and needs that you want that school to know. Make sure you attend the back to school nights because you get a lot of information there. Parent conferences are done 3 times a year, and a lot of the schools have some really great events that really bring the community together. Please provide the staff an opportunity to get to know your child. We really, really want to know your child.
Parent involvement. There are a lot of ways parents can become involved both at the school level and at the district level. Certainly at the school level, parents are welcome to volunteer. As a working single mom, I wasn't always able to go into the building and volunteer in the building during the school day. But I found that if I asked the teacher if there was anything I could do outside of my work day, they always had different things I could do, whether it was cutting out letters of the alphabet for a blackboard, or whether it was cutting out different things that were laminated. They always found something for me to do. Each one of the schools has different kinds of advisory committees. There typically is the Collaborative School Committee. Many schools have parent-teacher student associations or parent-teacher associations. Typically they have a School Improvement Accountability Council. The Accountability Council and the Collaborative School Committee may be folded together. And then there's other activities where schools, certainly encourage parents to get involved. At the district level, there are some important advisory committees at the district level. Again, there's the District School Improvement Accountability Council, but there's also the Special Education Advisory Council. And that's a council where it isn't really a place to talk about individual questions or concerns in relation to your child, but it's the advisory council really, or advisory committee, serves to provide recommendations to Denver Public Schools Special Education Department, Student Equity and Opportunity, and or to Denver Public Schools Board of Education. And then at the district level, there's always a long list of other kinds of committees, whether it's a standing committee or a temporary committee, that parents can and are encouraged to get involved in. What if I disagree or if I have concerns with the school about the way my child is being educated or disciplined? I always feel like attempts should be made to resolve these differences as soon as they arise. Is problem solving. It's AdvocacyDenver. We're an advocacy agency, but we always look at trying to resolve issues at the lowest level. First with the teacher, and that the teacher may not know that you have any questions or concerns. Next would be maybe sharing those concerns. If you're not satisfied with the teacher's response, is maybe going to the principal. Principal supervises teachers, principal supervises related service providers. The next chain in the chain of command is the special education instructional specialist. They're assigned to schools by region. And then next would be the special education director. Special education director is certainly responsive to questions or concerns, but that person might ask you whether you've discussed that with the teacher, with the principal, with the special education instructional specialist. It's always important, I think, to go through the chain of command. And then finally, if you're not satisfied with the response from these different public school providers, and if your concern is in relation to your child's individualized education program or the way the school is implementing it, you can certainly request mediation. Mediation is available through Colorado Department of Education. It's at no cost to
the parents or to the school district, and mediators are in a good position to really, they're neutral to help the team come to an agreement. In addition, in today's world, Colorado Department of Education also offers what's referred to as facilitated IEP meetings, where they have staff that's available, and certainly they're not employees of the district, but they're able to come in and really help facilitate an IEP meeting and certainly make sure that all voices are heard. And then the very last thing that is available to families is there are formal complaint procedures under Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, whether that's a request for due process or whether it's a request or submitting a formal complaint to Colorado Department of Education. That's referred to as a state complaint. Again, we always make the recommendation that you try to resolve issues at the lowest level. I found during my career is the formal complaint, while sometimes those complaints are filed, is sometimes I think there's value in resolving the issues at the lowest level, because you want to make sure that there's that good, strong working relationship with the school. And then sometimes I've found too is while the state can order the district or school to do something, I think there's value in sitting down at the lower level, coming to an agreement, and then you're certain that the school and the teacher will own that decision. That's all we have for today's presentation. Is certainly if you have additional questions, you're encouraged to talk to your child's current teacher or provider. Jane Miyahara with Denver Public Schools, she has staff that's incredibly responsive to parents' questions, particularly when it comes to transitioning into Denver Public Schools, whether it's from Part C or from a program where your child is just turning 3 and getting ready to come into Denver Public Schools, or whether your child is transitioning from preschool to kindergarten. In addition to that, AdvocacyDenver is able to provide advocacy support to many parents who have kids coming into the school system. Please understand that AdvocacyDenver, we do get to a point where we're at capacity. We're always happy to answer questions and whenever possible, help families navigate the Denver Public School system. Thank you for, we hope this information has been helpful.
Thank you so much. We hope your child has a good transition into DPS.
Bye.